Either you get married or leave the wagon train. The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence between the group of travelers. Coop Spencer had been at odds with his maker since birth, but for once in his sorry life, he was filled with such a profound sense of relief and happiness that he very nearly sent a prayer of thanks heavenward. Hollis Tremblay, the wagon master of the Oregon-bound company Coop was traveling with, stared expectantly at Coop and the young woman standing beside him, Belle. Coop realized for one wild moment that he didn't know her last name. But Hollis's demand was about to give Coop a chance at happiness he hadn't dared to imagine for himself. The other two folks completed the circle, Jason Goodwin, the company's doctor, and his new wife, Maddie. Friends of Hollis and of Belle, too. Of a sort. They seemed to be holding their combined breath as they waited on someone, Coop or Belle, to answer Hollis's demand. "I'll do it." Coop was proud of the way he kept his voice even. When he finally looked down at the woman beside him, his voice softened even more. "I'll marry you." But instead of a smile or a word of thanks that he'd stepped in to make things right for her, her eyes flashed. She spun on her heel and marched away. Coop's pulse slammed in his temples, and the potential happiness fizzing in his stomach turned sour. He started after her, but not before Maddie caught Belle's elbow and fell into step with her. "I've got things to attend to," Hollis called out from where they'd left him. "Belle," Maddie started. "I won't do it," the younger woman muttered. Even from a few strides behind her, Coop saw the flare of color high in her cheeks when her head turned. "Hold up a minute," Doc said. Coop hadn't realized the other man was just behind him until Doc caught Coop's arm in one hand. Coop whirled on him, threw off the hold. Doc didn't react, other than a pointed raise of his eyebrow. "Give Maddie a minute to speak to the girl," the older man said mildly. Coop was poised on his toes, mind whirling with ways he could convince Belle. None that painted him in a pretty light. "Besides, I'm not convinced you should marry a woman you just met," Doc went on. "You did!" Coop threw the words at him, blood boiling. Though the man didn't react, Coop still held the memory of the moments when Doc had punched him. It had happened weeks ago, on a night when the good Doc had been lost in grief and emotion. Now he simply watched Coop calmly. It couldn't be more obvious that love, marrying Maddie, had settled something inside the man. Marriage seemed like such an easy answer. Belle needed protection from the man hunting her, from salacious gossip within the company, and from the wandering eyes of the more disreputable men among them. But Belle hadn't even considered a wagon train wedding before she'd stormed off. Sure, there were better prospects than him, but he was here, and he was willing. "What's going on?" A new voice joined, coming closer. A voice Coop well knew, his older brother, Leo. Coop turned to start back after Belle, heard the Doc answer Leo. "Hollis just gave orders that Belle must marry to stay on the wagon train. Your brother is trying to convince her to say yes." He registered Leo's angry grunt and heard the crunch of his brother's boots on the rocky ground, following Coop. Yet another sign of Coop's disfavor with his maker.